And without further ado, please take it over, Maria.
All right. Can everybody see my screen?
We can.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. This is my favorite topic to talk about. And Anne gave you my, I got another pop-up window.
Yeah. We just lost your
Yeah.
sharing
Okay.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right. Did we
There
get
you
it
go.
back?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. So, all I want to say is that our nonprofit is a friends group, which is in the United States. We have friends groups that are affiliated with refuges and the national parks. And because they're government agencies, we do advocacy and fundraising for them. So, things that they can't do as government employees. So, um, Hopper Mountain and Bitter Creek are our two national wildlife refuges that we're affiliated with. All right, so these seven handsome creatures are make up the New World vulture family. Prominently featured is the California condor. And because you guys live somewhat close to the new Northern California flock that the Yurok tribe is managing with Redwood National Forest, I've tried to put a little bit of information about that flock throughout this. And the first thing is that in the Yurok language, condor is Pregonish. And that will be the last Yurok language word that I will try to pronounce for you tonight. California condors on the International Union for Conservation of Nature scale are listed as critically endangered. And this the scale is judged by habitat loss and size of the population, things like that. So California condors listed as critically endangered. On this chart, the Andean condor, which obviously is found down in South America, is listed as vulnerable. All the other guys are least concern on the scale. And as far as where they live, turkey vultures range up where you are, all the way down to South America, and all the rest of them are south of me, Central America or South America. Ah, I apologize. All right. So the California condor is the largest North American land bird. There's the white pelican is about the same size as a condor. It's 3 meter wingspan. It stands about a meter tall and weighs between 8 to 11 kilos. Its natural lifespan may be more than 60 years. We have our oldest condor is 59 and he is still breeding. So for sure, natural lifespan is more than 60 years. They have powerful beaks, but they don't have talons. They have clawed feet. So that makes them agile on the ground and that they can stand on the carcass, but the way they get to the meat is by using their beak. They don't have any true vocalization. They can snort and hiss for different reasons, perhaps to communicate with each other, to show um, their dissatisfaction with the situation. But little condor chicks will kind of hiss at their parents as a way to get food. So they have bald heads, and the biologists think that they possibly communicate by blushing, which you can see that guy up in the right corner has a very colorful head. And also, he's got his air sacs. The air sacs in the cheek and the neck are inflated. And they think that also is a way that they communicate. So the condor's superpower is their ability to soar long distances. So their broad wings and stiff tails are designed for that. They use thermals for soaring flight, and I'll show you a couple maps of GPS hits, and they're totally in the foothills and the mountains. Instead of going straight across a valley, they'll actually hug the mountains. So they definitely need that orographic lift off the mountainsides. You typically only see them flapping when they're taking off or landing. The those thermals are strongest in the middle of the day, and so that's when the condors are up and about, which is one of the biologists' favorite thing about studying them because they don't have to get up at the crack of dawn. They can soar at altitudes above 450 meters. They can go up to speeds of 90 kilometers per hour. And in a single day, they can go 240 kilometers easily. So this map is of Southern California, and it's GPS hits from 2023 of the 100-ish birds that make up our flock. We can talk about the different flocks later. I think what I really want to point out here is that this flock's been established for 30 years, and they range in an area about 480 kilometers north to south. Condors don't migrate, but in the winter, they don't travel quite as far. It's just a question of daylight. So this is a map of the Northern California, the new flock, and their centered home base is Klamath. And I'm sorry to report that they seem to be heading more south than north, but the first ones were released in 2022, and in 2024, the birds were getting 150 kilometers away from home base. So I told you that let's peek back again. I can't remember the kilometer number. 480 kilometers is the range of the established Southern California flock. And so they have a ways to go to get to that, but the distance, if you go up through the Northern Cascades between Klamath and Whistler, is about 1,200 kilometers. So I'm not going to say it won't happen that you get those birds up there, but it's going to take a while. All right. So getting back to condors, what are they about? They're obligate scavengers, so they only eat carrion. But they'll consume flesh, organs, small bones, and the hide and fur as well. They use ultra acidic stomachs to digest all of that, and they're highly resistant to harmful bacterial toxins like botulism. So they're basically our cleanup crew, which keeps our ecosystems clean. So they can eat about 240 kilograms of food a year. And what I want you to see on this slide is in the bottom right, that's a whale carcass that washed up on the Big Sur coastline. And the three birds in front with the tags are condors that are working on breaking into the carcass. And you can see a couple turkey vultures there waiting for the condors to do their job. And I'm sorry if anyone's eating their dinner right now. All right, after they clean up the environment, they like to clean themselves. They love the water, they love bathing. But when they can't find a water source, they'll rub their head and neck and beak on the ground. So, what I love about condors is that they're flocky. They have a hierarchy. There's a top dog in the area, but you see them together quite a lot. They roost together. They'll fly together. They'll feed together. Of course, the top dog gets to eat first before the youngest members of the flock. Um, Another thing about the hierarchy is that they get the prime roosting spot. So you can see in the bottom right, there's a picture of snags with condors on them. And the top three birds are all red-headed adults. And the little juvenile with the dark head is looking up at them. And that's not a prime roosting site, as you can see on the left, that one bird has poop all over him, and he's a juvenile. So, top left photo. That is one of our flight pens at Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge. It's where um, in the flight pen they can either do the new releases, which we'll talk about, or when they capture the wild flying birds to do checkups on them. And so in this picture, you can see that there are birds in the flight pen, but there's also the wild flying birds sitting on the top. And they're like looky-loos, what's going on? I like to say that they're waiting for their buddies to get out of condor jail. Courtship. So condors don't reach sexual maturity till they're 5 or 6. But once they're 5 or 6, they don't instantly find mates and have kids. Some of that's due to the hierarchy in the flock. And males have to identify a nesting territory. But once they do find a potential mate, you can see this sort of vampire pose is how the males display to the females. And I have a video I'll show you at the end of what this looks like in motion. Um, Once a female is receptive, they will mate, and then they'll do what's called pair flying, which is this incredible, beautiful synchronized flying that you can see in the right hand picture. And even though it looks really beautiful, the biologists speculate that this is just the male keeping tabs on the female after they've mated so that no other male sneaks in there. Um, Pairs are monogamous, kind of like humans are. They can mate for life, but if, say, they have several failed breeding seasons, then perhaps they'll break up and find new mates. Female condors have been known to trade up in the hierarchy, so a male can lose his mate that way. Uh, some condors form trios to raise a chick. So it can be either an extra male or an extra female, and all of them will perform, take turns with incubating and feeding and brooding the chick. So where do they nest? The outside photos, if you look really closely, you can see that there's a full parent condor in each of those redwood trees. So in central and soon northern California, condors will nest in redwood trees, but when those aren't around, it's typically caves that they all of the Southern California flock nest in caves. And as you can see, this condor standing in the cave with the egg on the ground, they don't make nests. They don't put any kind of nesting material there. Though the female condor is actually standing up when she lays the egg and it drops to the floor. Um, so they'll have one chick per nesting attempt. So just one egg is laid. If the egg is lost, they will typically recycle. And the typical life cycle, because the chick is around so long, is one chick every other year. Incubation. So both parents help with the incubation. They typically do it by putting the egg on top of their feet and then kind of roosting down on it. I've seen in some videos that the parent just kind of hugs the egg under the wing. It takes about 2 months for the chick to hatch, and then it takes the chick almost 3 days to hatch out. And it's pretty common to see the parent helping the chick by picking at the eggshell. And so in our captive breeding facilities, they also help the chick come out. The egg is a real pale greenish color, and it's about the size of an avocado. So when things are successful, you get these adorable chicks. And I pretty much want to do this presentation only to show you how adorable chicks are. They come out like this little cotton ball in the middle. And then as they age, they get their gray thermal down. And then, of course, their flight feathers come in. So, just like incubation, both parents help with brooding and feeding the chick. So again, super adorable photos of chicks. The one point about this slide is that chicks go from that little puffball out of the egg to a full-size condor in 6 months, and then they fledge. And so the parents are fully occupied finding food to feed their young one. At 1 month, a condor chick eats 10% of his body weight per day, and so this is like a grown human eating 80 quarter pounders a day, which is unbelievable. All right. Again, I just put this in because these guys are just too adorable. This is the same chick showing 1 month of growth. It's in a nest box. So this is a captive breeding facility. And you can see the guy on the right not only has his gray thermal down, but he also has a super full crop and adorable clown feet. This is from a trail camera down at our refuge in Southern California. And when we call this ploofing, when it gets too hot, the chick will lay flat down on the dirt to try to cool off. Um, One thing to note in this photo, the one on the right, you can see that there's a bottle cap. Condor parents bring these back to the nest, and we think what they're doing is they're looking for sources of calcium, which would be little pieces of bone or seashells, things like that, to feed to the chick, because the chick, right, is going to grow so much in 6 months it needs the calcium for its bones. And the parent just mistakes our trash for a calcium source. So fledging at 6 months, when all goes well, the chick fledges at 6 months. They're full size. We've said that. You can see that they've got the dark head, and the white underneath their wings is not quite as defined as a parent. And then they'll spend about the next year with their parents learning the ropes about how to be a member of a flock, where good feeding sites are, where good roosting sites are, how to be safe in the wild. So now that we know all that about the condors, why did condors end up on the endangered species list? So condors emerged during the Pleistocene 40,000 years ago, and their range was basically from British Columbia to northern Baja and everything west of the Rockies. But 10,000 years ago, the Holocene extinction, we saw the extinction of a lot of large mammals like the mastodons and the dire wolves and the saber-toothed tigers, saber-toothed cats. So, and ground sloths, like all these amazing things, disappeared. And then we see the Condor range basically falling back to the West Coast, where there's still There's still large mammals, like the bighorn sheik and the pronghorns, but also marine carrion. There was still walruses, and then of course sea lions and whales as well. So then the humans came. The first Western recorded sighting was a priest on a Spanish ship. Russian fur traders were coming down into California. Unfortunately, they were responsible for wiping out um fur seals, harp seals, harbor seals, and walruses on the West Coast. Spanish settlers changed what the valley looked like by bringing cattle and sheep to graze. So this decimated our native grasses, which meant that some of our native fauna went extinct. But the cattle and sheep became a source of food for the condors. And then Lewis and Clark, this sketch at the bottom is from Lewis and Clark's journal, and they shot a species collected a condor for their collection near the Columbia River Gorge. So that's in the Portland area. So then we got more humans with the gold rush. The population down here went from 10,000 to more than 100,000 in 5 years. And by the end of the 1800s, agriculture and citrus was taking over the grazing lands, pushing the grazing into our foothills. It was fashionable to do egg and skin collection for both museums and private collections. Ranchers shot them because they thought that the condors were actually killing their cattle. It was just a misunderstanding. And then condors also, because they eat carrion, were highly impacted by a campaign to rid the countryside of predators with strychnine lace carcasses. And so these are the things that we know about, but my little boombox at the bottom is that once humans came into the picture, lead bullets came into the picture, which we'll see later is the primary cause of why the condors are on the endangered species list today. So in 1890, there was an estimate of 600 birds left. And at the turn of the century, already scientists were saying we need to do something or these birds are going to go endangered. So the first attempts at recovery, in 1905, California passed a law that says you can't kill or collect carcasses or eggs. But of course, all this activity is happening out in the wild, away from any kind of law enforcement. So it it's great that it was on the books, but it didn't prevent the population from still plummeting. So by World War II, we were down to 200 birds. We set some land aside for them after World War II. But by 1950, the population had plummeted enough to where the San Diego Zoo said uh, we should start captive breeding. Still in the 1960s, the population's getting down to less than 100 birds. And so in 1967, the Federal Endangered Species Act, the first one, was written. And unfortunately, it was toothless because it didn't have enforcement mechanisms, but it also didn't have the mandate to collect facts and data to try to figure out what was causing the decline and how we can turn that around. So in 1973, Nixon told Congress to take another crack at the Endangered Species Act. And so this one in 73 is the one that is still, well, as of today, still in force. And it came with sharp teeth. So both enforcement, but also a mandate to collect facts and data and come up with a plan. Interestingly, though, even though the condors were one of the first species listed with this act, it things are slow to happen. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife, which is the managers of all the endangered species, set up a national wildlife refuge, but it took some nonprofits, the Audubon Society and the Ornithologist Union, to have a committee and put out a report in 78, which pushed Congress to set up this Condor Recovery Program. And so that was done, established in 79, and it was managed by US Fish and Wildlife, had some other government partners, but also Audubon Society and the LA and San Diego Zoo were partners as well. So one of the first things that the recovery program does is they're desperate to find out how many birds do we have left. And so they hit on the idea of doing a photographic census because the way condors molt is very irregular. So when you take pictures of birds, you can actually say, this is that bird, this is that bird. So throughout the whole range, they sent people out with cameras and came back with stacks and stacks of pictures. And then when they sorted them, they only had 22 stacks. And so once they did eventually bring all those birds into captivity, we'll get there. And so they did the DNA workup on those 22 birds and found that there was only 14 genetic founders. So that's what our flock is existing on right now. So when they said 22 birds, this is when in 82, 32 years after San Diego Zoo broached the topic, a captive breeding program was given the green light. And so to do this, they started taking eggs from nests in the wild. Um, there was 5 breeding pairs in the wild, and they were able to remove over 2 years, 12 eggs. Unfortunately, the winter of 84, 85 was brutal on the condors, and it left them with only one breeding pair in the wild. And this was also at the time that after 50 years of uh, biologists studying condors, that they first confirmed a lead poisoning case. So and when you read the history of it, the biologists didn't even um, have an inkling that this was the problem. But when they found this bird in March of 84, there was nothing visibly wrong with the bird. It wasn't shot, it wasn't poisoned, and so they did a blood panel on it and found that the high levels of lead. So after this terrible winter, the very controversial decision was made to bring all the wild birds into captivity, which moved them to extinct in the wild status. And the last bird, AC9, you can see here, was captured on Easter Sunday in 87. So it took just over a year to bring in all the birds. And I would say one thing about the controversy is that the people against bringing all the birds in, they just didn't think that the birds would breed in captivity. And so fortunately, they were wrong. The birds are fantastic breeders in captivity. Um, this past year, the breeding programs had 50 chicks, which is a record. LA Zoo had 17, which is incredible. So um, the captive breeding program is going like gangbusters. San Diego Zoo Wild Animal Park had their 250th chick this past year. LA Zoo had their 200th. So there's even now in the wild when once they release birds, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. In 92 is when they were able to start re-releasing the birds. And so those birds had a chick in the wild. And then in 2017, a chick was born that had two wild parents again. So super successful. So this is just some population graphs. The top one shows you from 2010 to 2024. The bottom line is the captive population. So like I said, there's about 50 chicks waiting to go out. So there's about 150 birds in the captive breeding program, or um, some of them are at zoos. And I let me just say that the ones that are on display at zoos, they have been determined to have uh, uh, I don't know, how do you say this politically correctly? They maybe are too used to humans. They have bad behavior in the wild, and so they're have been brought back in and put into zoos. So that's about 200 birds. The middle one is the wild population, and then 566 is the total in the world. So the bottom line shows you from 1969, it shows you the declining historic population, and they're between 87 and 92 where they were extinct in the wild. So the Condor Recovery Program was tasked with coming up with a recovery plan. So in 75, it had basically five tenets: establish a captive breeding program, which they did; reintroduce the condor to the wild, which has happened; maintain habitat for the condor recovery, which we have. We have both preserves as well as national wildlife refuges, and then implement condor information and education programs. We're doing that tonight. The one place where they still have not been successful is minimizing mortality factors in the natural environment. And we'll talk about that a little later. So the whole point of the recovery program is to move the California condor to the right on the scale. So downlist it from critical to endangered to vulnerable to near threatened, and maybe least concerned one day. And so there's criteria of how do we back down that scale. So one is that you need two wild populations and a captive populations, which we have. We have the north of the Grand Canyon, Arizona, Utah flock, as well as the California flock. And so these non-captive populations need to be spatially disjunct, which they are, and contain descendants from each of the 14 founders, which they do. But what they don't do is they neither of them have the 150 birds yet or the breeding pairs. And more importantly, they're not reproductively self-sustaining. So the only way they have a positive rate of population growth is because every year captive bred chicks join those flocks. So captive breeding sites, there's five of them: LA Zoo, Oregon Zoo, San Diego Zoo Safari Park, the Chapultepec Zoo in Mexico City, and the World Center for Birds of Prey in Boise, Idaho. Again, this is just an excuse to show you cute condor chick pictures. So the chicks that are captive born stay with their parents until they fledge, which is about 6 months. And then they go to a flight pen with all the other chicks born that year. We call that a cohort. And in that flight pen goes an older mentor bird who basically shows them how to be a member of a flock, which means you give the mentor the best perch. The mentor gets to eat first. If the mentor sees the fledglings squabbling, it can intervene. So they look to that mentor bird for how to be a condor, how to break into a carcass, how to enjoy the water bath that's there in the flight pen with them. So once those fledglings get to be about 18 months, they're sent out to their release site where they stay in an on-site flight pen for plus or minus a month. And so that's the way they acclimatize to their environment. But because condors are curious and flocky, the wild flock will come by for a meet and greet to see who's new in the flight pen. As you can see, this picture of the Bitter Creek flight pen, there's several wild birds that are sitting on top. So these are the release sites. So these numbers, the first number is the date that the first releases happen, and the number in parentheses is the size of that flock at the end of 2024. So the first releases happened in Southern California by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, 1992, and there's 101 birds in that flock now. And then over in north of the Grand Canyon area, Vermilion Cliffs, the Peregrine Fund manages that flock. They started releasing birds in 1996, and they have 89 birds. And then Central California started releasing birds in 1997. That's the Ventano Wildlife Society, a nonprofit. They have 113 birds, and in 2003, Pinnacles National Park started co-managing that flock because so many birds, about half that flock spends their time over in Pinnacles. Um, and then let's see, who's next? Down in northern Mexico in 2002, they started releasing birds. They have a flock of 48 birds now. And then the most recent 2022 is the Northern California flock that's co-managed by the Yurok tribe and the Redwood National Park. And they have 18 birds now. So, like I said, all the flocks are managed by a different entity. So they have their own protocol, but typically it amounts to trying to get their hands on the wild birds at least once a year. And they do general health checks. They take blood samples. Sometimes they'll take a feather sample if there's an ongoing study going on. They also get vaccinations for West Nile and the now highly pathogenic avian influenza, which we call HPI. Their equipment also gets checked. Their wing tag, the actual vinyl tag, they have VHF transmitters. And like for Southern California, 60% of the flock has GPS transmitters on their wings. So all that equipment is checked. Batteries can be changed out, broken equipment can be changed out. If all looks good, the bird gets to go free, which is the bottom left-hand corner. But if something looks out of normal, then they go to the vet. Here in Southern California, they go to the LA or Oakland Zoo. And up the Yurok tribe, actually, there's a zoo in the same area that has stood up a whole area for the condors, both a workup room and also little pens to keep the condors in. One thing I do want to show you is that the picture in the top left of the four human biologists working up a bird, there's a bird standing on the roof of the blind, still checking out. Like they just are so curious. It's very cute. Okay, again, just wanted to show you some cute pictures of condors. This is the Hopper Mountain flight pen. You can see that the condors inside have friends standing on the top of the pen. The condors get trapped into these flight pens through a double door trap that is baited. And then once they're in the big flight pen area, the biologists run after them with giant butterfly nets to capture them, which it's as funny as it sounds. Another management practice is nest entries, which it's not done for every wild nest. Sometimes they're just too remote, or it's actually a dangerous approach to get to them. The biologists, like you can see in this top picture that there's ropes hanging down. Those biologists have actually rappelled down a rope to get to that nest. Um, these are more photos of nest entries, again, because they're adorable. The central one, to calm the chick, they blow cool air on it and also put a little kid's sock on its head. So just like a hood on a raptor. The bottom left, don't miss the fact that those are the condor's little feet dangling over the lap of the biologist. Okay, so we said that the third goal of the recovery plan is to minimize mortality factors in the wild. So what are these factors? Because condors are endangered species, a necropsy is performed on any carcass the um, that the biologist can recover. And so they've recovered 303, and half of those, the necropsy has said that the bird died of lead poisoning. So this is the problem. We'll talk some more about it, but I'll spoil the finale. If we can stop condors from being lead poisoned, we would all be out of business. The condors would be fine and thriving. They could come off the list. We could all find new nonprofits to work for. Um, Also on this wheel, I want to point out that at least 64% of these deaths are human related. So, along with lead poisoning, I put in there power lines, shooting, poisoning. And we could put fire in there as well. The Central California flock lost 12 birds to the Dolan fire in 2020, and that was started by a man. So, unnecessary. Okay, so how are condors being poisoned by lead? You can see in the center figure that a lead bullet will fragment when it hits an animal, and that the photo on the right is a copper bullet, and it shows that when it hits its target, it mushrooms, so it stays in one piece. So if a condor eats that, it doesn't absorb in his bloodstream, it just passes through the condor. But the lead flat fragments, as well as the big piece, can just sit in his gut. All those little fragments get absorbed in his bloodstream and he gets lead poison. So, just like a little child consuming lead paint, it causes neurological problems, which prevents the condor from digesting food, flying, walking. It's a horrendous way to die. And Myra Finkelstein is a toxicologist at UC Santa Cruz and has done tons of research into this. And she was the one who definitively proved that the isotopes of the lead that was coming out of condors match the lead bullet. So it wasn't the condor like gnawing on a rock and getting lead or something like that. So it's definitely lead ammunition. And she's also said that it just takes just a couple grains of lead in a condor, that's enough to poison and kill the condor. So, what are the solutions? In California, in 2019, a law went fully in effect that said you, if you hunt, you have to use non-lead ammunition. Um, this like speeding is against the law. This law maybe wasn't the way to go. We think now, in hindsight, that we've just made people mad. Um, it definitely Arizona, Oregon are all, they've got condors flying around. They are going the education route. and trying to have conversation with hunters and ranchers about using non-lead ammunition, and also um, removing, if you do use lead, remove all of that carcass from the landscape so that the condor doesn't get it. All right, so more on the lead problem, and I apologize that this doesn't have cute condor pictures on it. Testing shows that the majority of condors walk around every day with elevated blood levels that exceed the danger threshold that the Center for Disease Control sets for human children, and that nearly every bird in the wild will need emergency treatment, which is typically chelation therapy, which is a binding agent that is injected into the condor to try to flush the lead out of their system, which the treatment is really hard on their organs. So um, this is why the biologists have now gotten to the point where if the bird isn't exhibiting symptoms of lead poisoning and just registering high on the scale, they won't do the therapy. So nearly every bird needs this emergency treatment before reaching breeding age. Um, the good news is that data is showing that the California ban on lead ammunition is being followed by deer hunters. That the problem now is depredation of animals on ranches, like wild boars and ground squirrels, things that tear up your property, that hunters and ranchers, they don't make that association that when they're trying to eradicate problem animals, that that is also hunting, because the condor is going to eat a wild boar just as easily as it's going to eat a deer. And for sure, ground squirrel is a great snack. So right now, a lot of education is going out to landowners about uh, what to do with those carcasses as well. And I said already that lead exposure is the biggest obstacle to the recovery. Um, if we got let out, the birds would just be healthier, which we think would probably increase reproduction rates, and it also would allow them to better handle unexpected diversities that come up, for instance HPI, which I'll talk about in a second. um, so you basically, if we say 50% of the known deaths, we're missing about 350 condors and their offspring in the total. So this is lead in the Northern California flock. Yeah, I told you I was going to talk about the Northern California flock, and now I'm just going to give you bad news. Last year, A9 was released, and after only 2 weeks in the wild, he had an extremely elevated levels of blood, lead in his blood. And so he spent 22 days in the hospital getting multiple rounds of chelation therapy before he got re released. And at this same health check last fall, 8 other condors of the flock of 18, so 9 of 18, half the birds, had lead in their blood, but only one needed to be tested, so or treated. You can see that the photo on the left is A9 getting a radiograph to see if he has big pieces of lead in his digestive tract, and then the one on the right is the chelation therapy. So 2 years ago, fall of 2023, a six required chelation therapy. So, and at that time, 4 others of a flying flock of 8, so again, half, had the lead toxin in their blood. So, we had hoped that the Northern California flock would be isolated enough to avoid lead exposure, but unfortunately, the reality is different. So let me say a few things about H. pie. Highly pathogenic avian influenza, right? You hear it's in all of the United States poultry farms. And in 2023, the Arizona Utah flock lost 21 birds. Um, so USDA gave us emergency authorization to vaccinate the condors, which is underway. Our flock, I think we have a 50% has had both the vaccine and the 3 week booster. So as the birds are trapped, they get the vaccine. Um, so right now, our problem with H. pie is it's running rampant through the California dairy farms. And the biologists, when they're trapping the birds, used to use stillborn calves from organic dairies as their source of bait. And that was free because the dairies needed to get rid of those stillborn calves. So right now, our nonprofit is raising money so the biologists can uh, get food from Costco to use as bait. So it's um, not only are we worried about the birds getting it from other birds, but now we have to worry about them getting it from their food. But H. pie is not the lead threat. So Arizona, yeah, they lost a bunch of birds 1 year, but last in 2023, they lost 7 birds to lead poisoning, and they lost 11 birds to lead poisoning last year. So lead is the problem. So why am I hopeful? Sorry, I am hopeful. Let's look back to the Klamath area. The dam, uh, all 4 of those dams got removed finally, and originally the call to remove them started in the 1980s. And the movement cohered by 2002. And in fall of 2023, they started pulling the dams down. Took them 11 months before the river was fully free. And less than 3 weeks later, they found salmon spawning above the first dam site. And more than 100 made it above what was all 4 of the dam sites last year. So nature is resilient. We just need to give them a little bit of a helping hand. And also the Yurok tribe, it took them 90 years of work, 90, sorry, 19 years of work before from when they started talking about releasing condors back into their area to when the first one was released. So um yeah, we just need to keep plugging away. That's what keeps me hopeful. Just really quickly, our oldest bird is in the captive breeding program at the LA Zoo. His name is AC1. He was brought in 1966 as an injured fledgling. That's how come they know how old he is. He's 59. In the captive breeding program, he's fathered more than 38 offspring. In the wild flying flock, the oldest bird is 45, and he was one of the original birds brought in. And so he has an AC number, adult condor 4. And he happened to be in the captive breeding program, the dad of the first fertile condor egg. He had a daughter, Moloko, who's number 45, and she is still in the breeding program. And AC4 fathered 29 offspring in the captive breeding program and then was re released in 2015. And his latest claim to fame and why the biologists love him is in 2021, he and his mate hatched a chick. And a week after the chick hatched, the mom died of lead poisoning. And the biologists just ticked that off as a failed nest. Um, until AC4 brought an untagged fledgling to the release site. And they were able to trap the fledgling and do the blood work and found out that it was indeed his offspring. So he did an amazing job being a single parent. The most important thing is, did you see a condor? These photos are trying to show you a comparison between um, turkey vultures, which are the two pictures on the left, and a condor, a red-tailed hawk, and a raven. So the typically what gets confused is turkey vulture versus condor. And I think the easiest cue is that it's the trailing edge of the turkey vulture that's lighter, and the condor under their armpits is what's white. Where can I see condors in the wild? iNaturalist and eBird have been reporting sightings in the Klamath, California area. Navajo Bridge, north of the Grand Canyon in Marble Canyon, is the little town. That's a place where you can just basically sit in your car with your binoculars and watch condors. If you park and walk out on the pedestrian bridge, they love to fly over the bridge. A couple nest in the rocks underneath the bridge, so that's a pretty easy sight. Pinnacles National Park is also that's in Central California. It's a lovely little park, and you always see condors there. Captive condors closest to you guys is Oregon Zoo has them on display. And then one of our breeding sites, the Peregrine Fund World Center for Birds of Prey, they have a couple condors on display, as well as a bunch of raptor ambassadors that you can see if you visit there. Which condor did I see? Condor Spotter is both a website and an app for your phone. um, it was developed by Tim Huntington. I have a video from him queued up for you guys. This is, if you click on the Pacific Northwest flock, you can see their 18 birds plus their mentor. And if you click on one of these little individual birds, it gives you the pop-up on the left, which tells you what their name is, their sex, their stud book number, when they were born, how old they are, where they hatched, who their parents are, who their siblings are. And once they mate and have kids, it can tell you who their mate is and who their children are. So it's super fascinating if you want to go down the rabbit hole of condors. Social media, you can check out our Friends of Condors social media. Um, the other thing I want to highlight on this is if you're on Facebook, California Condor Recovery Group kind of pulls in posts from all the other sites that post condor stuff. So that's a good one-stop shop. But as far as the Europe Tribe, the Northern California Condor Restoration Program is the name of their Facebook site. But the Yurok Condor Restoration Program has a separate website. If you just Google Yurok Condor, they have a live feed that has incredible camera quality. So it's super fun to watch that feed. Um, I did want to just point out how amazing um, the Yurok tribe names their condors. And I'm not going to pronounce the Yurok names, but just reading the first couple names, like A0 was her name means she carries our prayers. And A1 is at last we fly. A2 is he returns. And A3, who was the first condor who chose to leave the flight pen, is the one who goes ahead. So just incredible names. So how can you help? Really talking to friends, family, neighbors, posting on social medias about the importance of using non-lead ammunition is really that would be super helpful. It takes a village to run the Condor Recovery Program. All right, questions. Oof, sorry, I hope I didn't go too long.
Not at all. That was great. There are a couple of comments, one question and one comment. So why don't lawmakers just ban the production of lead ammunition? What could possibly be the advantage of using it?
Cheap. It's cheap. Yeah. That I think that would be a super hard lift. In the United States, companies have a lot of sway over politicians. It's a great idea though.
And Jenny, who's coming to us from Invermere, which is in eastern British Columbia, said that she and her husband saw condors while hiking in the Grand Canyon in April 2010, and we're quite thrilled about it. And I actually saw them at Pinnacles, probably, I think it was probably 2019, or, maybe it was 2020. No, it couldn't have been 2021 maybe. Anyway, I'm just going to get this out of the way so people can see your videos.
These are, yeah, I can start this one again too. These are two birds at pinnacles mating, obviously. So the green tag is the female. And so you can see that the male is doing kind of his vulture dance around her. Yeah, these people who've seen birds at the Grand Canyon and pinnacles, super lucky. Yeah. And you said, why don't we ban the production of lead? I believe in hunting waterfowl, it's illegal and people follow the rules. So, it's just education.
I have a question from one of the people that's here.
Which is just, she said that sometimes one is released and it has bad behavior.
Oh, yeah. She wants to know what is bad behavior in a vulture that
So,
gets it taken back to jail.
yes. So, because they're so curious, um, and a lot of times it's the juveniles, right, that don't have chicks and mates to worry about. They can uh, they can tear a roof off of an RV. They can, get into trash. Yeah, they can tear up, uh, all your porch furniture. Yeah, uh, the zoos have moved, and this is a great video to show you while we're talking about it. This is um, typically in the wild, one chick, two parents. In this case, there's a zookeeper who's a condor whisperer, and he was able to get two parents to take care of three chicks, which is so they got birds to double clutch, so they had more eggs than parents. And this is a video showing three chicks going having eating. They're just adorable. um so uh at the beginning of the program in captivity, they would have to puppet raise, but because the chicks were so curious, they'd stick their head around the curtain. They would see people. And so they think that that's why some of these birds had bad behavior in the wild, because they started connecting people with their dinner. And so now the in the captive breeding, the puppets have been retired. Adult condors do all the work, which has helped.
That was a great shot of one falling over on its back and the parent coming
Yes,
riding it,
yes.
turtling. They are awfully cute.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, there were lots of chuckles here when they were looking at the cuteness of the babies.
Yeah. This is a nest box at the Oregon Zoo. So all these breeding facilities are um, not open to the public. They're in, like, the LA Zoo is here in the middle of LA, but it's deep in a canyon. And Oregon Zoo as well. It's off property. But Oregon Zoo does have a couple condors on display.
A couple more comments or questions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Melissa says the bad condors are like our habituated black bears here that we have.
Yes.
So same thing, just too much cuteness can get animals in trouble when they do become habituated. Walter asks, what was the furthest north in the historical range of the condors? And is there any hope that they will extend their range north as the turkey vultures are now?
So, one thing about the range, I'm just gonna, sorry about all this writing. This is a Instagram reel, but this is just an incredible video that was taken of an untagged juvenile fledge. Okay, so the range. One thing about condors is that they're only going to follow the mountains and the foothills. So the turkey vulture range is by definition going to be much bigger. But I do think that there's hope that the condors in the Yurok tribe will follow the northern Cascades up into BC eventually. But like I said, Southern California flock's been around 30 years, and they're just going about 300 miles, which is between here and Yosemite. And between Yurok and Whistler is more than twice that distance.
So Canadians are quite interested in the politics happening south of the border. And one of the questions asks, might Trump and Musk killing off of so many environmental and parks programs affect yours by eliminating funding and laying off those employees who manage the various environmental programs?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We lost a condor biologist who was still in her probationary period last week. And this week, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife biologists were told that their credit card was limited to $1, which, yeah, so, we can't buy toilet paper for the refuge, let alone, fix heavy equipment or, yeah, yeah, we're, uh, we're still trying to figure out, is it going to stop? It's a problem.
Yeah, we're very sympathetic, just so you know. And
Thank you.
I saw the
Thank
post, I
you.
believe, the biologist who was affected. AI is going to be able to replace a lot of things, but it's not going to be able to replace someone who knows how to rappel down into a condor nest and take blood samples.
Yeah.
Okay, someone else asks the question, does their behavior suggest intelligence, i.e. thinking and planning, along with their sociability? Not the government.
I
The
understand.
condors.
Yes, yes, yes. We all know the answer to that one. So I mean, when you think about, I mean, condors are big birds, but still, compare brain size to humans, pretty small. So a lot of it has got to be instinctual, built into their DNA. Um, but um, you they're very particular about where they nest. They spend a lot of time uh they have a nesting territory, but they'll check out every cave in that territory before they decide where they want to nest. So I mean, we think they're smart.
So I know you lost 12, you said, in the fires a few years back. And
Hmm.
I remember when that was happening and just how horrified. You did have some good stories, I think, during that period as well. But how much of, like, this last year with so much of the California hills above Los Angeles burning, how worried are you about the fires?
um Yes, very. And you said at the beginning when you introduced me that I did defensible space work at the refuge as a volunteer, which basically just means uh, preparing the refuge to mitigate fire dangers. So it is a problem. Luckily, these fires were not in the two fires that you heard about on the news were not in the current Condor range. Uh, there was a third fire that didn't make the news because it didn't do so much human damage. That was definitely where our flock hangs out. But
Which
we
fire
did
was
not lose
that?
any birds. In the Grapevine area,
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we were following that pretty closely too.
Yeah.
A couple of us have been visited Bear Divide, which is not too far from where a lot
Yeah,
of.
that's it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
A few people in the audience have had the chance to see condors. I can assure you that those who haven't really wish that they could. And they were kind of hoping the condors might come to us, but they may end up having to go south to see them before they get here. Do appreciate you very much, Maria, coming tonight and talking to us about it. It was a fantastic presentation, and these birds are so interesting. Does anyone have a last question? You can unmute and just ask it. You don't have to put it in the chat. Anyone in the room? We had over 50 people in the room. You couldn't see that as the speaker, but there's 5 of us here, and there were 53 in the room, including yourself. So a good crowd tonight. So thank you very much for coming. Oh, there's another message.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
just
yeah,
wondering,
thanks.
the
Go ahead.
tags seem to be very well designed not to interfere with their flight.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
So they have radios on them as well as the tags.
That's right. Yeah. The VHF is just a little antenna and unit that that's it will send out a mortality signal if it doesn't move after 24 hours. But it's all pretty small.
Okay, thanks very much. It's a great
Yeah,
presentation.
sure.
Maria, I
Thank
do have
you.
one more question for you.
Yeah.
Because of having to be recaught for checkups and such, do these birds kind of get used to that, and do they still resist it, or do they sort of go, oh yeah, day at the spa?
Right. Yeah. No, I think some of the birds uh like Ventana, the Central California flock, I think that it was 13 years before they'd gotten their hands on one of their birds, like that it just avoided anything to do with the trapping sites. And then, once you get your hands on the birds, they still they do not want to be there. Um, in your lap, being handled. So typically it takes 2 people. One person's kind of holding their feet, and then one has the arm around the bird and sort of bending the neck back, which uh, the condor has a very strong pulling, but not pushing. So holding the neck back kind of holds them in place because they can't push against that as well. That muscle isn't as developed. It's really interesting.
Some of us work bird banding and have handled barred owls, which are a fraction of the size of these birds. I can't imagine trying to manipulate them if they weren't being cooperative. So there are a couple more comments. Lots and lots of people saying thank you so much for the great presentation. What about the captive breeding program in Mexico? Are those birds being brought to the USA for release, or plans for a Mexico?
So, right, at the Mexico City Zoo, Chapultepec Zoo, those birds that they breed go to the Mexican release site. And then the San Diego captive breeding facility also sends birds to that release site.
Okay, well, thank you once again
Yeah.
for coming. And I know everybody enjoyed it very, very much. Thanks, everybody.
I took one note. I'm sorry
Okay,
to interrupt you.
sure. No,
That I forgot to tell you guys. If you go to Pinnacles, you can see yellow-billed magpies as well. And
yes.
they're incredible. And they're just sort of endemic just to that Central California area. So anyway, just
Yes.
wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, just another draw, right?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.